Hello, this is Claire Buscott here, and welcome for another one of my interview with the expert. And today I am thrilled to welcome Teresa Allen, which is with us from the United States. Welcome, Teresa. It's really lovely to speak to you today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
So let me just introduce the audience, introduce you to the audience for those who don't know you. So you are a customer service speaker and a customer service trainer. You've got your own company, which is called Common Sense Solution, and it's a national customer service training and consultancy firm, and you really help companies to bring common sense to customer service and customer experience. There's nothing wrong with customer service. It's all common sense, isn't it? Um,
Oh,
yes, it's so simple. Sometimes you just think, why are we trying to make things complicated? Um,
that's
and
right. Simple but not easy.
and you are also ranked number one global guru on the list of the world top customer service speakers. This is experts and amazing. Your top five US speaker as well in customer service. This is just amazing. And you've written a couple of books as well. One which is called Common Sense Service, and you're co-author to the second one, which is the Service Path. But we'll talk about those a little bit later. So today, Teresa, what I really wanted you to share with the audience is how to handle customer complaints more efficiently and how to actually turn that complaint into a real positive experience. Is that
Absolutely.
is that all right with you?
Absolutely. A great topic.
Great. So first of all, what leads someone to say that an interaction is good or bad? What is the difference?
Well, and I'm sure this is something that all of your viewers can relate to because, of course, we are all consumers as well as service providers. And I recently saw a study, it was by a company by the name of Dimensional Research, and they highlighted what consumers say they think makes something good or bad. And what I loved about it, Claire, is that of course it was all common sense. It wasn't rocket science, but sometimes we have to be hit over the head with that common sense and make sure we know how important it is. So the first thing they identified is that the problem, if there is one, is resolved quickly, preferably in one interaction. They highlighted that as one of the number one things to be rated as a good encounter. And on the converse side, folks who said an encounter was a bad one said they had to explain their complaint or their situation to multiple people and that it took too long to resolve. I think that this is just a factor of our very busy life that we all live in today. And, as I sometimes as a consumer say, good heavens, I only have time to handle this one time, not three times, or not take 20 minutes to have a simple encounter. And I do think that, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this later, but I do think sometimes this comes from the many channels of service that are offered today, and a customer can be transferred from one channel into another and have to keep repeating they had expressed either verbally or through chat or text to a second or third person, and that can be very frustrating. The next thing, which I really have to smile would be appropriate when I talk about it, is that good encounters, people say, are when people are nice. Can you imagine that? Someone is nice to
Really?
you.
Honestly?
As opposed to bad encounters where they view the person as somewhat unpleasant. And I think unpleasant is quite a nice word to frame it with, because I think some of us might have some other adjectives to describe some
Yeah, quite.
bad encounter. But, I think this goes back to something, and I hope you don't mind me interjecting here in the middle of this list, but
Go.
something that I often consult with companies, particularly smaller companies, when they're hiring is you have to pay attention to those first 5 or 10 seconds, because
Yeah.
that's how long someone has to make a first impression. And we do live in very judgmental societies. That's the topic of a whole nother conversation and day. But people do make quick judgments about whether they like someone or dislike them, or whether they think they're nice or they're rude. And so it really, even though common sense is quite a critical thing, and when hiring for the front line, it's something that unfortunately today we get very bogged down in human resource laws and so forth, and what you can and you can't say. And we're many times that person doing the initial interview, they're so worried about that function aspect and crossing all those things off their list that they forget to notice that first impression. And so that is very important. You can train a lot of things, but training someone into being a nice person, I would say, is a bit of a challenge as opposed to hiring someone who is nice to begin with. And then the last thing, which once again we see the exact opposites on either side of the threshold here, and that is if I rated something as good, well, probably the outcome was what I had originally hoped for. Whereas if it was bad, maybe the problem was never resolved, or it wasn't what I had hoped for. And what I think is we have to realize, and I think that many people watching, listening right now could do a little true confession and say, oh yes, I do that when we pick up that phone and call with a complaint particularly, we have almost written a little movie script already that we're about to go through.
Yeah.
And so we had a beginning and a middle and an end to that script. And so even if that service professional does a great job, if my ending doesn't match their ending, then maybe there's a disconnect and a dissatisfaction there.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to my kind of second question, really, because it's, you have, I call it very simply, people give you feedback. And what you're doing with that feedback, if you're not doing anything with that constructive feedback, becomes a complaint. So that's really between the difference between institutional complaint and transactional complaint. How would you describe the difference between the two complaints?
Right, and this is something I really like to focus on in training and even in keynote presentations, because oftentimes there's a lot of focus on what I would call transactional complaints. In other words, something doesn't go right in that encounter, whether it be in person or online or via chat or whatever, and we handle that. But sometimes, and that would be like person or product related. In other words, they didn't like that person's attitude, or there was something wrong with the product or the delivery or whatever, very transaction related. But oftentimes complaints we receive are what I would call institutional in nature. In other words, if you are standing in line at 5 o'clock with your groceries and there are 10 people in front of you in that line, and you take a look over and you see that there's 10 or 20 other registers, but only 2 of them are open, you know, what are you thinking? I don't know about you, Claire, but I think if anyone has ever if I ever have a line of people waiting to give me money, I will find a fast way to take it.
Absolutely.
So this happened to me once, and I actually wrote about it in my co-authored book. You know, I was standing there, I was so frustrated. I'm thinking about all the things I need to be doing, and I get up to the young lady and I said, excuse me, but why don't you have more registers open? Well, was that because I thought she made the hiring decisions for that corporation? No.
No.
I said it out of frustration. So, you know, I kind of expect, though, a 2-level response. What she did was she turned to me and she said, well, I'm doing the best I can, which she was until that moment, because that wasn't all I wanted to hear.
No.
And I think most of us, when we say something like that, we want the person to empathize with us and apologize for the inconvenience, even though that person, that service representative, didn't do anything wrong. I can still empathize that, oh, this is a busy time of day. I regret you've had to wait. And then I think it has to move to another level, and that is, you know, I will be sure to pass your concern on to our management, because that is critical aspect. You know, I'm not saying that just to fill dead air out there. I'm saying it because I hope the next time I come, I don't have to wait. And if you are blessed, I would say, by me returning after that type of an encounter, then hopefully, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, hopefully you will have done something to improve the situation as a company, as an institution. So that's very different. A transactional complaint, I think probably one of the most important things is that you act and you act quickly. Some of us I always mention were maybe counseled by a grandmother or a mother or father, don't let the sun set on an argument with your boyfriend, your spouse, or your partner. And so, what I would say is absolutely don't let the sun set on a business encounter that goes bad, because you may lose that customer for good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And that is actually, when I train the staff just to, and I do customer service training, it's about showing them the steps that they should be taking to actually respond to the customer's complaint. So tell us, what would be the different level of customer angriness? Angriness? Was that a word in English? Anger?
Well, I think our angriness might be quite high on occasion if the right triggers are in place. But you know what? A lot of times some people are in what I would call controlled anger. They're not like Teresa Allen. I'm pretty much an A-type personality. I will tell you if you're doing something I don't like. Many people are quite quiet. They kind of just internalize all of it. And so with a person, maybe it's a regular customer who comes in and you say, well, hello, Mrs. Jones, how are you? And, then, excuse me, I am so sorry. So at any rate, you hear that complaint and you're thinking, well, I'm not sure what has gone on here. And what you want to do is it's not even really verbalized as a complaint. It might just be an attitude kind of a thing. So Mrs. Jones, how are you today? And she says, fine. Well, everything's not fine, right? There's something wrong, but she's not telling you what is wrong. So that's a little dangerous situation. So what you have to do then is ask open-ended questions, I think, which we, of course, as you and I know as service trainers, I call them the newspaper questions, the what, where, why, when, how, because those get people talking, as opposed to the closed-ended, the is, can, are, have questions, which if you ask those types, the person's going to be sitting there going, yes, no, probably with that expression on their face, and they're not letting you know what has happened. So the controlled anger person, you might think, oh, well, that's a good thing. Well, actually, it can be the most dangerous to you insofar as lost business if you don't follow it up with open-ended, because they're the type that remain silent and then just take their business elsewhere. So that's a big danger for lost business. Whereas some people are much more expressed. They have expressed anger. They don't mind telling you and everyone else in your business or your lobby or whatever it may be what you did wrong. If you have the great pleasure of being on telephone service, I know many of your viewers probably in call centers, they're just screaming away. Well, they don't have a problem at all telling you what has gone wrong. So those people, I think it's very important that we let them vent. Now, if they're in person and it's distracting our other customers, there has to be a limit there, of course, which is a difficult situation. But if we can, just let them vent for a minute, let them give their little performance that they rehearsed, and then immediately focus on addressing them by name, so they're not just an account number or just a customer. And we don't know, how can we do that if we don't ask their name, Claire? I might say, oh, I certainly see that you're very upset. Again, my name is Teresa. May I ask your name? Yeah. And you say, well, it's Claire. And I say, well, Claire, thank you. Or you might say, Mrs. Scott. And and then I say, well, Mrs. Scott, I'm going to address you the way you identified yourself. But now it's two people talking to each other, which kind of brings that anger level down in and of itself, which is very important. And then I can empathize and go through some steps of how to solve it. There is a third area that I think we have to talk about real quickly, and that is irrational anger. That's when you sense someone is a little out of their mind, and in fact they are. If they are very, very emotional, those of us who have studied psychology know the left side of your brain controls the logic and the right side controls the emotion. And if we're in a totally emotional state, that logic just shuts down. So you could have all the great steps in the world and they wouldn't work on that person until they are calm. And but here's the thing. I have to judge, was that irrationality caused by an outside influence? And if it was, and this is the only time, I like to have a lot of fun, as I'm sure you do, in service training, but this is the only time I get a little serious. We do have some people that are a little off balance today, obviously. And so if we make that judgment and that little silent alarm goes off in us, then we should just go by our security procedures. But if not, then there are some steps that we can use to hopefully calm that person.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Thank you. That's brilliant tips. And I think it's also about learning about the complaint, or what is it that we're doing after a customer complaint. Is it just, do we just, oh yes, we dealt with that one, we'll put it on the shelf and that's it. We don't have to worry about it. Or do businesses really should be actually doing something with those complaints, what it is that they're following up to actually make sure that doesn't happen again?
Well, absolutely, and we alluded to that earlier with our discussion of the institutional complaints, but we should be doing many things to take the pulse on customer satisfaction. One would be surveys. I know you have been involved in that. Where people outline exactly what we have done wrong, and we need to review those. And you know what, too often, and I'm sure you've seen this, to me, too often that information stays locked in a cabinet in the marketing department or something and not shared with our front line. We need to share the specific complaints that have been received, do training on how to respond to those, and I hope we have time to maybe talk about that response. But also, obviously, we need to make sure that management is reviewing those in aggregate as well as individually and seeing, are there patterns here and what is the causation? In other words, do we have a policy in place, or maybe it's a federal or state or province, in your case, regulation that is causing this, and are our people trained how to respond? I mean, I think that a policy is more like a yellow light and a regulation is like a red light. So I have to train my people on how to respond to those, because in one I can maybe bend a little depending on the relationship, the situation. In the other, I know how to respond I have to know how to respond very firmly that this is a no and there's no going around it. So I think those are some of the things that we have to do as an organization, is to review our complaints and customer feedback, even positive feedback.
Absolutely.
What a shame if we get great compliments on an individual or a department and we never tell them that.
I know.
That's extremely important. So definitely focus on those at the organizational level as well as at the frontline or department level.
And I think that nowadays it's just not just a complaint coming into a business isn't just a complaint coming into the business, because that person can talk to 10,000s of people in seconds over through social media. So this is where
if I say your reputation is only a click away
absolutely
from burning up. So social has just changed the game totally, hasn't it? It's completely changed the game.
So how do you monitor?
Pardon me?
How do business monitor their social media? How can
and I love that you said, how do they monitor it? Because most importantly, first of all, they have to monitor it. Too often, and this happens, I would say, more in a small to medium-sized business as opposed to a large business, which of course the enterprise types of organizations, they have all kinds of steps and so forth to handle those things. But a small business maybe doesn't have a team of people to handle social media. Maybe it's a mom and pop shop, or maybe it's a family run business. And so what they do is they hear, and Claire, I'm sure you've seen this, they hear, oh, I have to be on social media. So they set up a Twitter or a Facebook or whatever, and then they think that's it, and they're not monitoring it. I once heard another consultant say, and I thought it was a brilliant comment, that if you, open a Twitter account and you never look at it or respond to it, it would be like you opened a call center and you never picked up the phone. Isn't that true?
So true.
So we have to have a monitoring. It's important that we're putting good things out there, but it's equally important that we are monitoring on a daily and almost even hourly basis, because whereas we talked before in a face-to-face encounter or a telephone encounter that we have to respond within, the first 12 to 24 hours, it's really quite shorter, isn't it, on social media?
Absolutely.
Response has to be quite expedited, and we have to know what that response should be given the channel we're in, how many other people are watching our response. I think first thanking someone for bringing a situation to our attention is great. And then, sharing what you are going to do to resolve it. And that way, others who may be viewing, who are potential or existing customers not involved in that particular transaction, get a confidence that, you are going to respond if something goes wrong. I believe most people know that we don't live in a perfect world, that things will happen.
Sure.
What they want to know is how are we going to react and respond when and if that situation occurs that has to be handled. Are we going to respond appropriately, or are we going to try and blame the customer for it, which of course never works, especially in social media. And we've seen some fairly viral, I think we call it, things that, we call it viral when something goes and someone makes a response and it isn't appropriate and it goes viral and it damages even a very large corporation's response. So it certainly could happen to a small business. Let's just take hospitality industry. I mean, if you're not monitoring what people are saying on TripAdvisor and on Yelp, you're just behind the game, aren't you?
Absolutely. And I think no one nowadays, and you've got to take a bit of a balance to it, but the people trust their favorite social media platform, don't they? They trust other people's views. So, Expedia, lastminute.com, all those kind of companies, the people, TripAdvisors, people actually go. You won't go now on holiday anywhere without actually checking out the hotel where you're going. So you think about a business, it's really similar in that way that, you'll want to know that other people trust that business, and that's what social media brings, or not.
Right. And that's so true, Claire. And, we have totally moved into a new world about messaging. I mean, it used to be, I have been in this business for 20 years. I can tell you when I started, the small businesses and even corporations that I dealt with, they controlled the message. Their marketing department controlled the message. Now the message is totally in the hands of the consumer, whether that be a business consumer or a person-to-person, a retail situation where you're just dealing with an individual who doesn't work for a business. It really doesn't matter.
No.
You can no longer, people will still spend money on advertising, but that can be completely negated by one tweet by a dissatisfied customer if it's not responded to appropriately. So we have to really be out there and watching and responding. And then, as we said before, we have to take that feedback, even from various social media channels, and aggregate that and see what do we need to do differently. And, I mentioned channels. We call it in the customer service world. I think sometimes we use our lingo, and I train people not to use lingo. But, whether you are on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or you're on Instagram or whatever it may be, it is very important that you find the channels that your customers are on and that you are present in all of those channels, which is a daunting task for a small business, yet a very important one. So my suggestion is, get on one, master that, get comfortable with it, and then add the others as you can handle it. Because the worst thing would to get on all of them and handle them all very poorly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just to round it out then, I think we've probably talked a lot of the steps, but what would be the 3 top tips to how to actually handle complaint? What would be, if we were saying to say, right, you must do this, 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 and that at all time? What would be your suggestion, your top tips?
Okay, and I will direct this to the individual as opposed, because we've talked a lot already about like a company or corporate response. If I'm that individual on the front lines, I think one of the first things I have to do is I have to keep myself calm, don't
Yes.
I? When someone issues a complaint, I need to feel those body early warning signals that are going off, that I'm getting a little clammy and sweaty and I'm starting to breathe quickly, and realize that that person has tried to suck me into their level of anger, and I need to shut that switch off. And the only way to do that, I think, is to listen for the facts and not the feelings. Because when people are upset, they're going to give a lot of feeling statements. You people can't do anything right. That's not telling me anything about the problem. And what happens too often is I'm sitting there as the provider going, oh, really? Well, why don't you try working here for a day? And then I miss their factual statement of, I've called 3 times and no one has returned my calls.
Yeah.
Okay. So I need to be laser focused in on those facts that a customer is relating to me. And then respond with empathy, not sympathy. Sympathy means I kind of get in the boat with them. And also, by the way, not immediately saying, I'm sorry. I would say, I regret your inconvenience, or I regret you've had to wait, or whatever. But until you know all the facts, why would you be saying, I'm sorry? That's not a good thing. And then, trying to find a solution. But as you were listening, you should have been listening for hints as to what they thought was a good solution. Now, can we always go to the customer solution? No, but maybe we can meet them halfway. And then, so important as we are concluding, to confirm that they are in agreement that this has been resolved. Because the danger otherwise is that they hang up or walk away or get off their computer chat and they go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, we want to thank them for bringing it to our attention, but confirming after we finish talking that we can move ahead together as a team, and that this is a we thing. It's not an I and a you. Thank you, I'm so glad we were able to come to this solution. And because if you're just saying I, then you didn't consult them enough. And, conflict, the interesting thing about it, I think, is that you can actually have a stronger relationship with a customer after a conflict if it's handled appropriately than you had even before it. So it's an opportunity for building a relationship.
Yeah, it's all about rapport, isn't it? And it's all about building that relationship with your customers. And like you said earlier, you can't 100 and 200% do everything right, but as long as when you get it wrong, you make it right again as soon as you can. That's the key to all the complaints, isn't it? It's how the key to deliver really exceptional customer service. So Teresa, we're just about to finish, so it was just amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of experience, and it certainly made a lot of common sense to me. And you've got your book. How can people actually buy your book? Where can they go and get your book?
Okay, and I have a little copy of it, and I should mention my book is not like a textbook where you read the 10 points of service. As a speaker, I'm much of a storyteller, and so This is called Common Sense Service, Close Encounters on the Front Lines, and I actually have close encounters that I had that I think people can relate to, and my goal is that they all become obsessed as I am about observing when we're out there, shopping or dining or whatever it may be. So it's a quick read. It's only about a 30-minute read or so. And they can get it on my website, which is allenspeaks with an S on the end.com. And I can even have it printed with a custom insert. Let's say if a company was wanting to buy one for every member of their staff, they could write a message to them and I could have that inserted, or from a meeting sponsor, something like that. So I think they would enjoy reading it. I also have a CD audio version of that book as well, and you can online through my website download the audio files to listen to if you would prefer to do that versus picking up the hard copy.
Brilliant. Oh, that's a really good idea, actually. It's a nice thing to do, really. It's a little thank you, isn't it, to all your employees to do a little gift like that would be a fantastic idea. So there you go. It's out there, and after when we finished, I will put your website on the back of the page so people are sure that they can go and pick up on the right page. And if they need you, they just need to find you and just come and check out your website. And thank you so much for being here today. It was just amazing speaking to you.
And I did want to mention my blog is also on my website. I invite anyone to subscribe to that as well. So thank you. This has just been a joy and a pleasure to meet you and someone else who is very passionate about service. And in a far off land, hopefully, as we said earlier, I hope we get to meet in person, and I hope I get to meet some of your folks in person across the pond, right?
Across the, two queens. So you were the queen of Mardi Gras, and I'm the busy queen bee. So we the two queens are going to have to meet up at some stage, aren't they?
That's absolutely true. Well, thank you, Claire. I greatly appreciate this opportunity to meet with your viewers and listeners. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.